Correct.
Well, this is a hot Friday morning, and it's going to get even hotter when myself and Pat McGart begin to exchange what it says in the papers. Have you your papers perused, Pat?
Dr. Collins, I've got a major problem this morning. My email, it doesn't seem to be working, but
oh God.
On my phone, but it does on the computer. I presume there's a full inbox somewhere or other. No, Jude, everywhere. Like, see, yesterday, I went and cut the grass for about half an hour, and I was knackered. I know I'm, as you know, Jude, I'm a slimline type person. So the sweat was actually lashing at me. I like rarely have I've been in Australia, I've been in America, I've been in Spain, but geez, Jude, yesterday was a day to compare with any in terms of heat.
That's right. I went out for a jog, and I didn't think I was going to make it home. I was tempted to stop and just walk because just feel. I think it's a clamminess or the sweat was simply pouring off me by the time I got in the door.
Yeah.
I suppose there's different kinds of heat, just as there's different kinds of cold. Like in Canada, the cold goes really far down, but it's very dry cold, and I think that's part of the reason you can bear it. And maybe when you get, they say New York's a terrible place for what do they call it?
Humidity.
Humidity, exactly.
Yeah.
Humidity. I thought I was going to say humility, but that would be right.
No, that's definitely not true of New York.
Well, there are various, a lot of comparisons are made in the press today and in other days between this year and 1976. Do you remember 1976, Pat?
Very well. It's the year I got married, Dr. Collins.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, you would remember that, wouldn't you?
Yes.
Well, they're glancing back to that, and they're in the Guardian today. They list several things you could do to contribute to saving water. Now, whether or not we should be needing to save water is another question. But some of the ways they mention is through the shower and your use of your loo. Are you a shower man, Pat?
Yes, I am indeed.
You're not a bath man then?
No, I haven't had a bath in years.
I am the same, exactly the same. I don't think I want it anymore. I used to enjoy lying back in the bath, but I guess it was messy, and you're always splashing water onto the floor and all sorts of disadvantages. The shower, the advice they give in the shower is that they say you should spend less time in it, which is a no-brainer, I suppose. But the other thing they say is use less power with it. Now, I don't know, our shower is a power shower. These ones that really hammer down. We rarely use it that way because it just seems kind of, even apart from the drought, it's kind of wasteful. Now, I know it's kind of exhilarating at the same time to be hit by these sort of powerful needles of water.
Yeah.
But you don't really need it, if you're going to...
Not at all, no. We have an electric shower, and so you just put it on, Jude, and 5 minutes, like 5 minutes is more than enough. Jesus, in fact, 3 minutes probably enough to have a shower. Now, when you consider the fact, Jude, if you're having a bath, how much water do you need to fill a bath? Maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 gallons. I don't know.
Yeah.
But but it's very wasteful. But anyway, Jude, but another thing too. Yesterday I read that the Irish Water has issued a water warning. Jesus, Jude, I had to laugh. We have about 360 days of rain, and we get 4 or 5 days of nice weather. And Irish Water, and I presume it's the same in the north, issue a water warning. And you go, good. Hey, Jude, there's a place called South Adelaide in Australia, and they haven't had water there, I think, for something like 7 years. And they manage. How come here, when we get 2 or 3 days of sunshine in a row, you're warning, don't cut down on your showers, don't water the lawn, and for God's sake, don't wash your car.
I think that's a bit hard, I sort of understand your frustration, but the fact is, it's a bit like cold weather. For example, in Canada, there would be, huge amount of snow for about 6 months. But when they have a heavy snowfall, the scrapers would be out before dawn, long before dawn, and they'd have the streets totally passable, so you didn't have the disruption that you would have if there was a snowfall or a snowstorm here. It's because we're not used to it, that we're not set to handle it. We haven't got the apparatus. And the same thing applies to heat, like places like Australia or whatever would be used to hot weather and the need to conserve and, have a system that would work in terms of water. We're not. We don't expect to have sunshine.
Jude, I live in Donegal, and up until about a week ago, the water was like if you go driving anywhere in this county, the water was coming off the sides of the mountains, and you're saying, and what usually happens is Donegal County Council issues a warning. There'll be restrictions on water supply tonight. You're going, good merciful Jesus. What sort of country do we live in? No, I do accept maybe their infrastructure is not so good, and we don't really use reservoirs all that much.
Yeah. But they also said some of the things. Do you remember Prince Charles was one of the people who was giving advice on how you could conserve water back in '76? Do you remember?
Nope, certainly not.
I do. He had one a piece of advice which is very sensible. He said that what you should do is put a brick in the cistern of your toilet, and that meant that there was less water being used each time you flushed it. Now I see in the Guardian today that they talk about installing a displacement device into the cistern. It's a sort of an inflatable thing which comes up each time you flush, and essentially you use less water. Exactly the same principle as Prince Charles's thing about putting a brick. So I suppose it's kind of like cars, I think, Pat. We don't need to, it's against the law to go over 70 miles an hour, and yet our cars are capable of doing 100, and likewise, we use far more water than we really need for places like the loo. There were unkind people in 1976 who said that another of Prince Charles's recommendations was that you should have a shower with a friend. So you see,
don't go there. Don't go there.
You save water.
Yesterday, apparently, I wrote it down. I'd reached 30.5 degrees at Oak Park in Carlow. So I've only, Jude, we were having a discussion the last day. Name me a place in Ireland that nobody ever hears of, or tells of, or goes to. And I came up with Carlow. And here, then a week later, here it is. It's got the warmest thing in Ireland. Because, Jude, I've never known a footballer come from Carlow, a GAA player, a camogie player, a politician, anybody from Carlow. Yeah. And there it is, the hottest place in Ireland.
Well, it does have a very good song, Follow Me Down to Carlow.
Carlow,
that justifies its existence alone. The other thing they said, though, was this would only apply to people who had baths, and that is to use your bath water, feed a hose out the window and into a barrel, and use that for watering your plants or your
that
flowers.
Makes sense.
See, that's an example of how wasteful we are. I remember I did a house swap one time with a family from Canada, or not? No, from the States, from California.
Yeah.
And we were staying in their place, and I had to get directions as to how often I was to turn on the water in their grounds. Yeah. And I remember the guy saying, I know in Ireland that water isn't really a problem, but it's a very important commodity to be preserved about California. Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
But that idea of feeding it out and using that, they also say a dishwasher. If you have a dishwasher, you should make sure you set it on ECO, economy. We set it on economy all the time. And they say you should just scrape your plates. You don't need to wash them or rinse them under a tap before you put them into the dishwasher. Are you a dishwasher man?
Yeah, I do. Excuse me. I know how to fill it, and how. The only thing I don't know, Jude, which is actually ridiculous, don't know how to sort of get it going. I had a button on, and as for the washing machine, like that to me is high tech.
The washing machine's a mystery to me, but we always put on the Echo just before going to bed, on the assumption that that's the time it'll use. And it runs, the funny thing is, on economy setting, it runs for about 4 hours. But that doesn't matter because you're in bed anyway. But I would have thought that economy setting would be very brisk and short. But apparently the amount of water used depends on the sort of velocity at which it's coming out. I suppose like the power.
By the way, and this is going to come across really badly, and the detail is so. I saw a thing on Facebook.
Discuss this, Pat.
Facebook the other day, and it showed this massive machine, and it says this machine disturbs 90 tons of earth every 2 minutes, it uses between 800 and 1,000 liters of diesel every to dig the earth to find this stuff that we use in our batteries in our cars and so on. And it says, tell us how is this green energy and so on. And apparently, I don't know how true it is. It was disputed. There was about 10,000 cars sitting apparently in a big yard somewhere outside of Paris, where these electric cars, apparently the batteries cannot be disposed of because they are lithium or whatever the hell it is, and so on. And they said, how can this be green? So you sort of go, I totally, personal responsibility for the earth is a matter for us all. But then, I am no scientist, and I would love to know, see, are all these things true that we actually, to get something that's so-called green, we absolutely destroy something else to get it?
You're right. And there's a fact, I think it's a letter that's in the Irish Times today about that. And the guy's talking about electric cars. I think it was the same guy now. He said he had a diesel car. He was going to switch over to an electric car because there was a fair bit of mileage in the diesel. And he thought it'd be good for the planet and so on. But he was told he'd have to wait 6 months. So he went back to his diesel, held on to his diesel and said, forget it. And he found out that the carbon footprint of the manufacturing phase and fuel and power supply of EVs and his electric vehicles is almost 3 times that you would have to go through for a conventional diesel car.
Yeah. That was this thing. And Jude, I can't recall the details, but it was much more devastating and damning than what I'm after giving you. It went through all the different phases about how much was needed, how it was, and for one sort of battery, so much damage was done. And they said, this is great.
It's getting like food. 1 minute they're telling you that chocolate's bad for you. Next minute they're saying dark chocolate, very good. 1 minute they're telling you taking wine is bad for you. And next minute they're saying, red wine, a glass of red wine is very good for your heart once a day. It keeps flipping to the point where you...
But I knew this guy who was big into fish farming. In fact, he owned a fish farm. And I got onto him one day about this whole thing about, fish farming and all. He says, Pat, it's like this. He says, man had to learn to fish or to farm the land. He says, and we're going to have to learn to farm the sea. Now, Jude, there are serious disputes about fish farming. I think the cages that I see are ugly. You go to some beautiful place in Donegal, and the next thing you look out and you see that these big fish cages and so on. But at the other side of the story, in Norway, it's a huge industry. In Scotland, the west of Scotland's a huge industry. And in remote areas where there's unemployment and all the rest of it, they can be very lucrative in the sense of your son doesn't have to emigrate to London to get a job. He can stay in Fanad or Downings or Carrygart or somewhere or up around Teelan or Glencolmcille or wherever. So Jude, all these things. Is there a balance and as all the do-goodery sort of ignoring the reality?
Well, that's possible indeed. The way that these fish farms are organized or run, I think, could be compared to how we do with poultry. Free range is much better and tastes better. I always think free range eggs. And the same thing applies to salmon, for example. You get fish or farmed salmon as distinct from wild salmon. And there is definitely a different taste to the wild salmon. I don't know. I guess I know a lot of young people, including at least one of my sons, who have moved to vegetarianism, veganism, and they said they don't feel the need of it. I think young people eat differently, just as they drink differently from we did. Like when I was young, you went out for a night and you drank. Well, speaking personally about me and my mates, we went out and we drank as much as we could hold and sometimes more. Yeah. But today when young guys go out, they seem to, not that they don't consume a reasonable amount of alcohol, but they mix it in with food and that kind of thing. It's less focus on getting boozy.
Yeah. Well, of course, too, Jude, there's a couple of my younger sons tell me that a lot of young guys and gals these days have a wee sniff of cocaine. It doesn't affect, they can pose as much as they want. They don't put on weight. Whereas you drink 10 pints of Guinness for about a month, just see if the trousers still fit you at the end of the month.
Well, that's a thing we've discussed. There's a lot to be said for drugs. They're very much quicker. Okay, let's move on and talk a bit about something in the Irish Examiner today. A guy called Sean O'Driscoll, apparently, has written a book, The Extraordinary Life of Rose Dugdale. Do you remember Rose Dugdale?
I do indeed. I remember her very well. Rose Dugdale, if I remember the facts correctly, you've just thrown it out, she was an English heiress, very wealthy, from a very family. She met up with a Donegal guy, Eddie Gallagher, and they decided they wanted to get somebody out of jail or something, and they hijacked a helicopter and threw, I think, milk creamery can bombs down in Strabane RUC station. And anyway, she was involved with Eddie. Eddie then later was involved in the kidnapping of Dr. Tita Harriman down about Limerick. And there was a massive big manhunt for him. And the whole thing went on, Jude, and it dominated our headlines for best part of, I'd say, 10 days. Anyway, eventually Harriman was found. Was it somewhere in Carrigan? No, it wasn't Carrigan Shannon. It was somewhere down about Clare, I think, anyway. Yeah. And so he was released, and there was a big... Anyway, Eddie got about 20 years in jail, and anyway, he came out and he opened up a pub somewhere up around South Donegal, and he's disappeared. I haven't heard from him or heard of him in years.
Nearly a slip of the tongue there, Pat. Yeah, that's roughly what this... review of this book touches on. She really was from a very privileged background, you know.
Absolutely.
The parents, they had an art gallery virtually in the house. Yeah. They had an extraordinary amount of shares and wealth. They really were part of the central establishment of England. She went to Oxford, I think it was, and did PPE, as they say, philosophy, economics, and what's the third one? No, maybe it's PPE, philosophy, politics, and economics. And she was a debutante. She was, that was 1958 or something. She was, the way the young ladies used to line up and they'd be presented to the Queen. Yes, and then that was called coming out. Different kind of coming out from today.
They weren't gay.
But she got. I think she got a taste of things. Oh yeah, while she was at university, her and a couple of other people really strongly protested against the fact that the Students' Union, I think it was, or the Debating Society was strictly only men. Yeah. And she was sort of fearless in the way she conducted her campaign. She then, I think on social issues around where she lived, she was involved. And then eventually she made her link with Ireland. But she gave away so much money. She was actually, if you think about her in Christian terms, she was extraordinary. She gave up all the wealth that she had. She gave something like 150,000 quid to poor people in Dublin, or maybe it was in England before she went to Dublin. She risked her life shockingly, like as you say, her and Eddie Gallagher hijacked this helicopter and flew it over the top of the Strabane. I can hardly imagine it. Strabane police station.
And dropped out this creamery can.
And then the bloody things didn't work. It didn't explode. Yeah. And she got pregnant with Eddie Gallagher's child when she was in prison, and she didn't tell anybody. Didn't tell anybody, any of the police, because, or the security, because she, I think was some sort of ruse they were going to pull that the IRA would sort of get her released at the point where she had to be rushed to hospital, but it didn't come off anyway. And then, as you say, Eddie and Marion Coyle got kidnapped, but she was unrepentant. She also stole paintings worth 8 million.
Was it from the BEIT?
Something like that, yeah. And they're really rare, Vermeer, and really top class stuff. But apparently she's totally unrepentant. I don't know where she's living now. I was trying to find out.
Is she still living?
I looked up on Wikipedia, and it doesn't say that she's dead. Yeah. And according to it, she was born in 1941, which would make her about 81 now. So why should she be? But she's unrepentant, and she says she really is pleased that she played her part in the struggle for Irish independence. Amazing.
Amazing story.
Amazing woman. It just shows you can turn your life around. Okay, quick word about this Enterprise 75. 75 years since the train started running from Belfast to Dublin. Isn't that great?
Why is that a story at all? No, Jude,
75 years. 75 years.
75 years, grand. Hey, is there a big story, a train running between Birmingham and London, or Glasgow and Edinburgh? Jesus, it's a one country. Well,
let's face it. The people of Belfast have to scrape around for news sometimes, or at least the TV programs have to. The only interesting fact I heard was when the first Enterprise train left Belfast and went to Dublin, it took something like 2 hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Now, if you take a train from Belfast to Dublin, you'll get there in 2 hours and 13 minutes. So they've knocked a full 2 minutes off since 1975.
Jesus, Jude, two
Isn't that unbelievable? Now they say, oh well, we do stop at Drogheda and Dundalk and so on. But I mean, that's only peanuts. And then they're talking about, we're interested in, we're making moves to make it not just 8 trains a day, but maybe hourly. And everybody's like, oh, fantastic. I mean, they're thinking about it. It may never happen. It might happen in 10 years' time. Ridiculous.
And they've probably been thinking about it for this last 10 years as well.
The other thing is this, Pat. What about railway lines? Was there a network that went up to Donegal? Yeah,
there was. Jude, we are one of the counties. Like, Jude, we don't have a mile of motorway or an inch of railway. And we have a wee airport down in Carrickfinn near Dunlow. Donegal is badly served by infrastructure in terms of transport.
But wasn't there a train at one stage? I remember there used to be a guy in my class who used to get out last period, always get out early, and we used to envy him. He was from St. Johnson, and he had to get the train. Now, was there a train line to St. Johnson?
There was a train link to St. Johnson. There was a train link to St. Johnson. There was a Burton Port line. Letterkenny was the hub. And there was County Donegal railways, there was Lough Swilly railways, and there was another one whose name escapes me right now. And they all shut up about definitely the last one closed about 1965.
Why don't they resurrect them? I mean, the route must have been carved out. So would it not essentially be a matter of, clearing out the weeds, putting in fresh lines, but you'd have their route already established? And I mean,
Jude, I think I'm open to correction on this, but I'd say you'd find a couple of houses built where the lines used to be and whatever at this stage.
Well, maybe, but I mean, the same thing applies to roads. There's been a huge expansion in roads in the south, which I rejoice in. But if you're going to be really serious about the environment, and actually, as somebody who can travel for free now, the rail line makes an awful lot of sense.
Yeah, Jude, there was a wee German girl came to our house some years back, and she had travelled up from Dublin, and one of the things she said was, God, she says, your roads are crowded all the time. And Jude, she says, one simple way, she says, one train, she says, would take about 30 lorries off the road right away. And by the way, that's not an exaggeration. One train could probably take about 150 lorries off the road at a time. That's right. Exactly. If it ran from Dublin to Donegal.
Yeah.
Jude, you can imagine how much fumes are going into the air with all these trucks and all that. Yet one train could do that.
Well, why is it? I mean, I don't get it. I don't understand why Greenpeace and these people aren't really putting on severe pressure and aren't presenting, because even it was, nearly 70 years ago or 75 years ago that the trains were running the network into Donegal and Derry and all the rest of it. The sort of main work has been done. You got the line, you know where it is. It should be a relatively inexpensive thing rather than carving.
No, I think there was a Bring Back the Rail campaign here in Donegal.
Yeah.
And apparently I was involved on a peripheral sort of a way.
Yeah.
And Jude, they were talking that it would take billions and it'll never happen because allegedly, Jude, I am not up to speed on this, but there was claims that planning permissions would need to be, compulsory orders would need to be, houses are built on it, factories are built on it, schools are built on it, and as well as that, it's overgrowing and farmers have taken over their land and so on, that it would be just illegal and minefield, if you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, if they really cared about the environment, I think they'd be looking at it much more closely than that. And I'm sure there was plenty of people who lost their homes or their land or whatever, a bit of their land, if they carved out those really good roads that you now have. Anyway, let's move from that to a topic which has caught your eye, Pat. Something happening in Newry, Mourne and Down District Council.
No, Jude, I was looking last night. I saw on social media, and now I was posting, a guy says, look, the Antrim Camogie ladies, obviously Camogie's ladies team, won the All-Ireland. And apparently, the mayor of Causeway Coast and Glens, a guy called I think it's Ivan Wallace, or Ivor Wallace, sorry. He's a DUP councillor.
Yeah.
And he was asked to host a reception for the team. Yeah. And he refused. Apparently, he has found some reason not to host it. And the DUP mayor of Mid and East Antrim Council, a guy, as far as I remember, called John Carson. Now, this is on social media, so it's possibly open.
Yeah.
Was also asked, and apparently has found it, hasn't responded to the request. Now, that might not be totally accurate, but anyway, this is the claim. The mayor of the Causeway and Glens is reporting Irish News, I think, on Tuesday. Dude, you know, you sort of go, these councils are supposed to represent all the community. The mayor is supposed to represent all of them. He doesn't have to agree with it. But a mayor refusing to hold a reception for an All-Ireland winning team as a turkeys, to say the least. And it's, you know, it smacks of something else as well. You know, are they still living in a time where, Jude, if a mayor of, say, Derry, an SDLP or Sinn Féin mayor, refused to host the Foyle and Londonderry ladies winning hockey team, I would frown pretty badly on that.
Aye.
But, you know, but by the way, all the leading lefties, the Fintan O'Toole's and all the rest, will find some sort of excuse to say, oh, that, you know, this is just in the way it is and so on. But, you know, it's just another example of sort of that bad-mannered, intolerance, discriminatory, you know, attitude that's on display.
Aye, well, that's right. And did you mention the fact that Newry, you did, I think, that Newry, Mourne and Down District Council were going to honour Northern Ireland keeper Pat Jennings.
Yeah,
he's the only man in Ireland whose voice is equally rumbly alongside Gerry Adams's.
That's right.
But the thing is this, Pat, the unionist people and the unionist politicians in particular have been taught or have taught themselves that the equivalent of the GAA is the Orange Order.
Yeah.
Now, in a way, I can see why they think that, because the Orange Order clearly is a political institution and a sectarian one at that, but that's another matter. The GAA has got its roots in Irish nationalism. There's no doubt about that. So I guess since they've been taught that this is the equivalent of the Orange Order, they say, and we do fly the flag, the Irish flag, and we do have our in the veins sung and so on. So they could say, well, this is very much a one-sided thing. We wouldn't be hosting the Orange Order, so forget it, guys. Is that not I mean, I suspect that's the attitude the average councillor might take. There'd be some among them who would be a deeper hue of sectarianism. But I have a notion that there's a fair proportion of them would just see it that way. You know.
Yeah, I agree with the only thing about it, Jude, and you know, I'm sort of teaching my granny how to suck eggs here, but as you well know, the GAA is open to everybody. Like, if you're a Protestant, Catholic, Hindu, and you know you can play, and you're open. Along where I live, it's not a totally mixed community, but there's a lot of people who are not of the Catholic national background, and they're all playing GAA. There's no issue, and if you go down there in the summer's day, they have what they call cool camps, and all these kids are down, you know, down during the summer's day. Literally hundreds of them. Jude, I took your point totally, and I understand the point you're making that and many unionists mind the GAA and the Orange Order are equivalents, but it's a false equivalency, Jude, to use that term. But the other thing as well, Jude, if a hockey team won a British Cup and an SDLP mayor and a Sinn Féin person refused, you would be saying it, as would I, as would the media. This is disgraceful.
Yeah.
But yet, this has sort of been downplayed.
Well, you know, I think, Pat, you've almost outlined the reasons why unionist politicians can't afford, sort of, so to speak, to host some event that would honour the GAA or any branch of it. And that is that the GAA has been so hugely successful, so hugely expansionist. And that matches in the minds of some unionist politicians the expansion of nationalism. It is true that, you know, nationalism is on the rise in the north and unionism is shrinking. And here's one big, glaring, glamorous factor or example of it. So maybe that's why they refuse to host it. Not the very fact that it really deserves to be because it's so big and they're so successful is the reason they don't want to do it. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. Of course it does. But you know, I got involved in a discussion. I think you wrote an article about Clinton O'Toole's article, and earlier this week. And I have come to the conclusion, Jude, you know, a lot of that unionism gets a bye ball and so much coverage that it's, you know, this sort of thing, that everything that happened, and it's old ground for me and you here. But I was just thinking, you know, it's all very well to intellectualize the troubles in the north and give a policy. But wee Mrs. Doherty, let's take wee Mrs. Doherty, who lives in the Bogside in Derry, and she has 4 or 5 of a family. And Johnny, the eldest, had to emigrate. The other boy is unemployed. The third son is, what do you call it, maybe a job as a barman or something like that. And the 2 daughters get married, and you know, they have 2 or 3 kids, and times are tough. And they're living in poor housing conditions, and the husband hasn't had a job, or maybe a casual labourer down at the docks. That's what causes strife, political alienation, you know, and so not some theory about Marxism or Leninism or or even Paul McCartneyism. You know, it's anyway. And I when I read all this crap, I'm going, you know, Fintan, go on, get yourself a life.
Well, you see, that's a sort of, dare I say it, a narrative that the South has been pushing, and they've got into such a rut with it they can't think otherwise. Yeah. Actually, the absurdity of it shows today in the Irish Times, because the guy there was a talk given in some festival or another down about Cork by a Dr. Andy Bielenberg, who's a historian, and he's looking at the War of Independence, or the Tan War, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And this notion that in Cork there were sectarian murders of Protestants.
Yeah, Owen Harris plugged that for years.
Aye, Dunmanway. There was, I think, 10 Protestants were killed, and they were civilians. Yeah. And he says, yes, that probably was a sectarian occurrence. But he says that doesn't mean that all the other killings of Protestants that occurred in the course of that war were sectarian. In fact, he says there was a sectarian propaganda war going on. Yeah. And when somebody would be shot as a spy, say, and there was quite a few of them that happened to around Cork, if it was a Protestant, as it very often was, this would be highlighted and it would be seen as a sectarian killing.
Yeah.
Not the fact that these guys might have been feeding information to the security forces, but the fact that they were Protestant. If they were a Catholic, they didn't say anything what their religion was. So his point was that they managed to preach, people like, I suppose, Owen Harris, are preaching that it was sectarian because Protestants were singled out and killed. And sometimes on occasions, like Dunmanway, there was sectarian killing. But like the North, where there was occasions where there was sectarian killing, of course, but in many instances, guys were shot because they were in some way contributing.
Jude, I'm open to correction on this, but I remember reading somewhere that there was 2 IRA guys came to some guy, and within 10 minutes after they left, they were arrested. You know, that type of thing. So somebody had informed them.
Yeah.
Now, they were able to narrow it down quickly that your guy that they talked to was the only person that seen him, and he turned out to be a Protestant. And they shot him because he said he had quite clearly informed. You know, now, Jude, was that sectarian or was that just an act of war?
It was an act of war, of course it was. But the point that this Dr. Bielenberg is making is that this was how it has been presented in Cork, the history of Cork back in the 20s. And it has a parallel with the way that things were presented up here.
Yeah.
I mean, the people of the South are still convinced, and people in England are certainly still convinced, the average person, I mean, that what the North was about was Catholics killing Protestants and Protestants killing Catholics.
Yeah.
And they've managed to implant that. I sort of sometimes despair of nationalism, that they haven't found a way to counter that and remove that notion from people's minds.
Yeah.
Because the same people who now applaud, or, you know, the Queen comes and bows reverently at the Garden of Remembrance.
Yeah.
But they still are, well, they would say, oh, yes, that was a war of independence. They don't say the same thing about the North. Whereas the events that occurred were so similar.
But the narrative, I think the definition now of a Dublin 4 liberal type is that you take a unionist position. You know that the unionists were actually the people that were deprived and should be understood, and that the nationalists are psychopathic madmen who have this blood sacrifice, who admire our Irish patriots and so on, and we're all mad Gael goers and so on. When in actual fact, the person from Donegal or Derry or Tyrone or Fermanagh is the same as Leitrim or Cavan. You know, you sort of go, Jesus, how has it become so distorted?
Mm-hmm. Let me just say one thing with it, Pat, because we'll have to stop there. And that is, sometimes people tell you that the situation in the North during the Troubles was terribly complicated. You know, so complicated. And there used to be a saying in the early days, if you understand the conflict in the North, you're just not informed. You know, that's how complicated it is. In the end, I really don't think it's complicated at all. What you have is a group of people who say, we're dominant in this artificially created state. They want to maintain a link with Britain. The majority of the people in the North, I believe, and certainly in Ireland, wanted not to be like that. And in any other circumstances, Britain would move out. So it's as simple as that. Now, there are all sorts of other things happened as a result, but that's all it amounted to. Okay, that's kind of serious stuff to be at. Pat, how are you going to spend the day? Are you going to have nude sunbathing?
I'll probably go nude swimming. And,
do a Sammy Wilson, I recommend
I'll do a Sammy Wilson. Jude,
make sure you use sunblock on your bum before you go.
I'll tell you, as much as I'm looking at it's got seriously warm already. And it's only 11:43.
I'm not complaining. I love it.
Enjoy your weekend, Dr. Collins.
Enjoy your weekend, Pat.
All the best, Jude.
Right.